Good morning, everyone, and happy Friday. Thanks so much for joining us for QI Power Hour. This is Tracy Sharon, CEO at the Saskatchewan Health Quality Council. For those of you joining us for the first time, welcome. QI Power Hour is a free monthly webinar learning series hosted by the Health Quality Council here in Saskatchewan, and we bring together improvers from a variety of sectors with an interest in improving health and to learn about quality improvement related topics. I am joining you today from HQC's main office in Saskatoon, located on Treaty 6 territory. As a provincial organization, the Health Quality Council also serves the entire province of Saskatchewan, which includes traditional lands that are parts of Treaties 2, 4, 5, 8, and 10 as well, and is the homeland of the Métis peoples. As an inhabitant of these treaty lands, I want to affirm my commitment to respect and nurture the land and all of the peoples who share it, so that we may create a bright future for all. For those of you who don't know, all of these QI Power Hour sessions are recorded and posted to Health Quality's Council's website. So if you'd like to view this presentation again following the session, please visit our website to do that. And you can see all of the past QI Power Hour webinars as well on our website. While you're there, you can sign up for the QI Power Hour distribution list to ensure you receive regular invitations to all of our upcoming QI Power Hour sessions. Over the last year, we've been so excited to see the continued growth of Quality Improvement Power Hour through our home province of Saskatchewan. You can see many of the organizations who've had folks attend our sessions throughout the province. And across Canada. And around the world. Thank you so much for joining us today and joining our learning community, and happy to have you a part of it. Just a little bit about WebEx for those of you who might not be familiar with it, because we're really looking forward to your engagement and participation on the webinar today. So we very much encourage you to share your questions and your insights during today's presentation by making use of the chat function. And you can find that by clicking on, there's a little message bubble towards the bottom of your screen. That will launch the chat panel, and it'll be on the right-hand side of your screen. And we encourage you to share your questions, comments, and ideas throughout the entire presentation. We'll also have some time dedicated to questions and answers at the end. I'll be watching the chat and kind of pulling questions out of there to ask at the end of the presentation, so please feel free to enter those at any time, and I'll be monitoring. So let's just take a moment to practice that function. If you could go into your chat now and just say hello and share with us today where you're joining us from. I think folks have found the chat. There we go, from Regina. Morning, Caroline. Saskatoon. Excellent. Great. Great. So great to see you making use of the chat, and please continue throughout the presentation. And so now I'm very happy to introduce our speakers today, Kevin Hayes and Scott Wells. Since 2017, Kevin has been co-leading the Data for Good chapters in Regina and Saskatoon. Through Data for Good, Kevin has worked with such programs as the Summer Success Camps for the United Way and organizations such as the Pro Bono Law Society of Saskatchewan, United Ways 211, the Sophia House, and the Regina Food Bank. Outside of Data for Good, Kevin previously led the business innovation at the Phoenix Group in Regina and is currently the head of growth at Conway Consulting. Over his career, Kevin has focused on web analytics and understanding user behavior online through data to help organizations achieve business-focused outcomes. Scott Wells, his experience spans the oil and gas, healthcare, telecommunications, and financial sectors, including leading data teams for the past decade. Scott's current role is the Director of Business Process and Analytics at Sask Energy. And in his role, he's working to build an analytics practice within Sask Energy and transform processes using a data-driven approach. Scott has been involved in Data for Good since 2018 and a co-lead since 2020. In his time with Data for Good, Scott has supported a number of organizations, including the Regina Food Bank, 211 Saskatchewan, and Sophia House. So without further ado, I'll pass it over to Kevin to start the presentation.
Thanks, Tracy. And thanks for having us talk here and share with you about what Data for Good does nationally and within our own province. My name is Kevin Hayes, and as Tracy mentioned, Scott and I will be walking you through what Data for Good is, who we work with, and what our purpose is. But first, it's really important to understand, why we exist. 75% of all organizations really struggle to adopt data and analytics into their business. And there's numerous reasons for that. Executive buy-in is one of the biggest challenges. Everybody likes data per se, but it's actually everybody likes the outcomes of data. Everybody likes the information. Not a lot of people love the spreadsheets and the coding and development. And so getting executive buy-in to invest in the proper infrastructure for a data and analytics system is sometimes can be challenging. A strategic alignment between business objectives and what the data can provide can be a tough route for some organizations. We see a lot of data quality and data literacy issues, and so some organizations are collecting data, but the quality of the data isn't of good enough quality to do useful activities with. There's also challenges with data literacy in organizations. So there, are people who are not familiar with how to collect data or how to look at it or how to analyze it. Organizations often, nonprofits and charities specifically, often don't have data folks on staff. Limited access to tools is problematic for some organizations, and then just an overall lack of resources. So, although a lot of for-profit companies have these challenges, we really at Data for Good see these particular challenges with charities and nonprofits who are already resource strapped to begin with in a lot of cases. So our purpose as Data for Good is twofold. One is to build data literacy and socially focused organizations. And so that's pretty broad. Any organization that's doing good for people or the environment and that needs help with their data, those are the organizations we work with. And our second goal, though, is to really contribute positively to the data community within Saskatchewan. So Data for Good as a whole is a national organization. We have chapters in 9 different provinces, from Vancouver to Toronto and even further east. And so we have national support, but we also are really about bringing communities together in the chapters in provinces and cities. So we really focus on bringing people together to work on projects. And so it's a win for the charities and the nonprofits. It's a win for the people doing the work, and it's a win for the organizations, the people that the organizations serve. In Regina, and for most of Saskatchewan, this is the structure of Data for Good here. Is we have 4 chapter leads here in Saskatchewan, or in Regina, myself and Scott, as well as Marina and Josh, and together we help run the organization here in Saskatchewan. Data for Good is 100% volunteer-based organization, so we don't take any money. We do take some kind of donations of gifts for sometimes of our participants, but really we are 100% volunteer-based. So us 4 leads run the organization here in Saskatchewan, and then we have other support people here, such as Cody Rogers, who helps organize some of our events and does communications with people that speak at our events, which we'll talk about here in a second. And then we have Arnav, who is our Data Viz lead. And so he runs what's called the Data Viz Challenge, which you are going to learn about here in a short minute. So it really is a team effort to get Data for Good working with charities and nonprofits here in Saskatchewan. And then in addition to that, we actually have teams of volunteers who actually do the work in addition to the leads that I just shared with you, who actually are working with the charities and nonprofits. And those teams can be anywhere from 3 people to I think our biggest team was 22, which we'll get into here in a second. So on the right-hand side, we have really 4 components to Data for Good here in Saskatchewan that we execute on. We have meetups, which are monthly gatherings where charities, nonprofits, and people come in to just learn about data. We have what are called light projects, which are projects where we're working with organizations who are really just kind of at the beginning of their data journey. They have what would be called low data maturity. So potentially, they're gathering 10 years worth of data on one single Excel spreadsheet. Then we work on major projects, which we'll go through as well. But these are organizations that are a little bit more sophisticated in their data infrastructure within their organization. And then we have data viz challenges, and those are a real way for us to engage with the community. And we'll go into each of these here coming up. So first, let's talk about data viz challenges. So data viz challenges happen basically on a quarterly basis. They're 90 days long, and we put out a data set to the community, and the community either participates as individuals or they come together in teams. And what they do is they take a data set and they take 90 days to build visualizations, to develop learnings about the particular data. So our last data viz challenge, we had bicycle safety data that was donated by SGI. And so we had about 10 teams sign up for the challenge, and each team took the same data set and visualized it to see if we could find any learnings about bike safety in Regina. Then we also had SAS Polytech as a sponsor of the Data Viz Challenge, and they donated courses for our participants, which we raffled off. So this is a way for we really try to get data within our province and connect that with people in the data community, and have them engage and present data to a group of people. They build these visualizations that they then have to present to the group of data for gooders, which can be 40 or 50 people. So it's not only is it an opportunity to work with data, but it's an opportunity for people to show off their skill set, for people to work in teams and learn how to do data visualizations, and really helps people up their data game. So this is an example in our Data Viz Challenge, our last one with our SGI bike data, that these are some of the submissions that we got. And we have everybody from junior people to really senior people submitting these visualizations. And at the end of the day, the people were competing for mostly bragging rights, but we had a very substantial trophy that we delivered to the winner, and then a gift card to Leo's that we also delivered. So we had 10 teams submit 10 visualizations, and out of that, we had the Data Viz Challenge champion, which was Arnav, and then we had the People's Choice Award, which was voted on by the participants in the Data Viz Challenge, and we had Bike Regina win the People's Choice Award. So on the right-hand side, you're seeing some data that came out of that Arnav created, a dashboard that he created, and he walked us through some of the pieces around, how do bike accidents happen and where do they happen, and do they happen when people are turning right versus left and all that stuff. And then the People's Choice Award, Bike Regina, this was their submission, and this got them the award voted on by the people. So that's our Data Viz challenges. So again, a way to engage the community, let the community engage with each other. There's learning, there's portfolio building, and all those wonderful pieces. The second piece we have is what are called meetups. And so these happen once a month. And in our meetups, we have organizations come, and not necessarily charities or nonprofits present on data, but we have just organizations come and share their thoughts, processes, challenges, successes, case studies on data. So as an example, we have Precision AI, which does AI and drone technology to help reduce the amount of chemicals that are used to kill threats on crops. So they came and talked about how they're using artificial intelligence to, really narrow in on finding weeds in crops and just blasting those. We have the Saskatchewan Rough Riders come in and talk about how they count how many times a referee blinks and how that indicates whether they're going to favorably call a game or not. We had the United Way come in and talk about their summer success program, 211, Pro Bono Law Saskatchewan. So we have, the purpose of our meetups is really just to bring the community together and discuss data topics. In the past, we had them in person, as you can see, and this one is actually our first Data for Good kickoff in 2017, I believe, at ISM. But more recently, because of COVID, we are doing things online, and this has brought a little bit more accessibility across Saskatchewan to our meetups, and allowed us to reach more people. I'll toss it over to Scott here. We'll talk about some of our projects.
Thanks, Kevin. So as Kevin was mentioning, one of kind of our core pieces of what we do is engaging with, nonprofit or other community organizations to really deliver some value to them. And so one of the larger initiatives that we worked on was the Regina Food Bank and some of the work that they did. So over COVID, the Regina Food Bank has had to drastically change the way that they're offering their services. Previously, it was pickup, and then through COVID, they altered it a little bit in terms of their business model, and they started doing delivery as well. And so just trying to understand the information that they had. So, oops. The goal of the work that we've done with Regina Food Bank was really to help utilize their data. And so their CEO is pretty forward thinking in terms of wanting to leverage their data, not necessarily knowing exactly the best way to do it. And so that's the reason why they had engaged us. And so this project was actually quite a bit larger than some of the other ones we had done previously. And we had actually involved 4 different work streams and close to 20 some individuals in terms of volunteers, from a mix of reporting, so just getting dashboarding and operational reporting together, some forecasting to understand kind of trends and what they were going to see in terms of clients or customers in the future, helping them out with their web and website, and then a geospatial analysis. So for us, our typical process, and it's probably no different than what a lot of folks are used to in other data requests that they get, we would initially start with a request. And so there is a request form on our website folks would fill out, or we would get them to go there to fill it out to understand what they're looking for. We would meet with the customers and then really go through and understand what requirements or what they were looking to achieve from this. From there, what we would do is get access to their data. Sometimes it is, full access, row level, depending on the type of data. Other times it's anonymized data, depending on the sensitivity of it. And then really from there, it's building out whatever kind of needs they have, whether it's reporting and tools or just ad hoc analysis. And then really lastly, we try to operationalize the information that's there so that these organizations can take this and run with it. And it's not necessarily we need to stay engaged in all of it as we go along. So an example of what we did with the Regina Food Bank, this is one of the pieces of analysis. They wanted to take a look at their location in Regina and understand the accessibility of it. And so in kind of the top left-hand corner, the heat map that you'll see there with the pin drop that's kind of in the top right, in the darker green, is their current location today. So they're in an area that's kind of industrial in Regina. It doesn't have great access to public transportation. And so a number of the individuals that would frequent their location struggle to get there, and it takes a lot of time. So it is, an entire night for some of these individuals, depending on where they live in Regina. And so their ask was, if we were to take a look at a different location or a different business model in terms of pop-ups or something else, where would we be best suited to have a location? So what the team had done is they ran a whole bunch of different analysis, understanding kind of the bus routes, understanding, traffic patterns, and a whole bunch of other pieces. And the bottom left is really what comes up with, the ideal location. And not shockingly, it's somewhere downtown, in downtown Regina. And the rationale for that is, one, that's where the vast majority of their clients or customers are, is around kind of the downtown core. But two, the location for public transportation, it connects a lot of the different arteries, and it just creates a much quicker transportation for individuals. So you can see in the bottom left-hand corner, the vast majority of individuals are covered kind of with the lighter green color, indicating it's substantially quicker for them to get access to the location or to food. So with that, really what the outcomes of this project were, one, it's still in kind of completion right now. We're still working to finalize it, but they actually use this to go to the city of Regina, and we've actually had conversations with the mayor around food insecurity and what this means. And it actually drove a larger conversation around who in Regina is actually providing services like the Regina Food Bank, and what does that look like? And so there's actually going to be some working sessions with the mayor to look at this in the near future. So really great success in terms of being able to drive value and kind of get the right conversations happening. But two, it also allowed the Regina Food Bank to really understand their business and their processes a little bit better and understand their clients, which again, a lot of organizations have access to client information, but it's not in a usable format and they can't really understand it at a deep level. So another example of an organization that we've worked with is the Sophia House. Sophia House offers second stage housing for individuals that may have been in a situation that wasn't great. And so what they do is they offer housing for a different length of time for whether it's the mother and any children that may be there as well. So the goal of this, again, very, very similar. They had access to some of their data, whether it was donation or client data, but they really weren't doing very much with it other than just the reporting to their board. So what we were able to do for them, again, was really just to build some operational reports. But the one piece that I guess I'm going to highlight, and one of the main kind of outcomes in the top right-hand corner, it really speaks to average stay by their clients and then their outcomes at exit. And so they had ideas previously that average length of stay did impact kind of the outcomes for their clients, but they weren't totally sure. And so what we're able to kind of walk through with them is it is true that if folks are able to stay for a longer period of time, if they're able to go through more programming and kind of help them with a whole bunch of life skills and just otherwise, they have a better outcome. And so what that means is a lot of folks that stayed shorter periods of time, they went back to similar patterns that they were in before, whether it was homelessness, into abusive homes, or what's called hidden homelessness. But at the end of the day, if they were able to understand that, they're able to take this information to whether it's their funders or otherwise and ask for additional funding, whether it's for more housing, because that's one of their biggest challenges. They are not a organization that is funded by the government or otherwise. It's all through donations. And so they do require some of those donations in order to either have more housing or either just keep the amount of housing that they do have today. So again, the outcomes of this one, we were able to confirm a lot of the assumptions that Sophia House had related to kind of their clients and what was going on. But as well, we were able to give them tools for them to really understand what was going on and keep up this level of reporting that they had. Again, not in a way that was going to require them to have a whole bunch of costs that were outside. So it really was kind of a free solution for them and ongoing in that sense. Okay, with that, I'm going to toss it back to Kevin.
Thanks, Scott. Scott just nailed a really important point right on the head there, is that there is, we are often working with organizations that have different infrastructures, different budgets, different amount of financial resources available, financial and people resources available. So one of the things that's really powerful with Data for Good, with our really diverse set of volunteers, is our ability to be able to find solutions to work within the current organization's infrastructure. And so in some cases, we've used free tools like Google Sheets and Google Data Studio and Google Forms to acquire data and then visualize that data and store that data using the whole essentially free Google ecosystem to do that. And then in other cases, we're using tools like Tableau or more sophisticated versions of Power BI, or sometimes we're using the free version of Power BI. So this is really about how can we make sure that the work that we do for these charities and nonprofits is not something that dies, the second we leave, but something that can actually sustain itself through the long term. And the way it sustains itself in the long term is making sure that the system has the least amount of friction between the system and the organization, so that it can be maintained. We always we do, I don't know if warranty is the right word, but we do make sure that we're always available ongoing, because as you know, with technology, I'm sure all of you have experienced technology doesn't last forever. So, systems change and sometimes things break or whatnot. But our goal is to really make sure that we create a sustainable system for the charity and the nonprofit so that they can continue on after we're gone. So with that, let's talk about 211 Saskatchewan. If you're not aware of what 211 is, it is, as you can see in the background there, it's a system that it's an organization that helps connect people with resources, and sometimes those are crisis resources. So, if people are looking to, there's some food insecurity issues, or they're looking for a shelter, or things like that, then you would go to 211. But it's also really about connecting people to resources. So that means if you're looking for a daycare, or you're looking for other kinds of kind of human services that aren't classified as crisis, you can go to 211 to do that. So we started working with 211, which is run by the United Way here in Saskatchewan, last year. And so 211 has two kind of ways to capture data. One is you can call 211, you can actually talk to somebody and say, hey, I'm looking for ABC. And somebody in the call center will help you find your piece. The other way is you can go to 211 Saskatchewan site, and you can actually search for the resources that you're looking for. So we were looking at ways, our goals with this project were looking at ways to identify data which actually shows 211's impact through the phone or through the website. And the second piece is we really want to assess and also centralize the 211 data and help 211 kind of progress their infrastructure. And then the last thing we wanted to do, because we started working with them, right when COVID was getting a lot of ground there, we wanted to see if we could help them identify opportunities to be proactive in terms of resource management, or particularly helping people get to services they need to do or they need to use. And so we started with a bit of a couple of things. One is we started with incomplete and unstructured data, which means that 211 had been capturing a lot of data, but there had been a couple of different systems that hadn't talked to each other, and they hadn't been structured in a way that all the data hadn't been structured in a way that could make use of 100% of the data. We had a lot of hypotheses and questions and business cases that we were trying to sort through and figure out. And that's kind of one of the challenges that a lot of organizations have, which is they say, well, let's look at the data and then we'll find the answer. We'll find a question within the data. And that's kind of the tail wagging the dog. And really what you need to come to the table with is a question that you need the data to answer and either prove or disprove. And so we worked with 211 on that piece when it comes to data. We were uncertain of the value or importance of all the available data. And so another really important piece for a charity or nonprofit to look at is just because you have the data doesn't mean that it's useful and helpful. And it was a common mindset a while ago to collect all the data and then sort it out. And it's becoming more and more accepted. And it's actually quite reasonable to, in many cases, just take the data that you want. And there's lots of reasons for that, or data that you need. One is storing data is expensive. And if you're storing a lot of data that you're not using, like it just becomes more of a hindrance more harmful than helpful if you're collecting too much data. So we had to really assess the value of the data. And then we also weren't sure what data was or was not being captured, and through the website and through the actual 211 phone calls. So I'm going to mostly focus on the web data here. And the reason is that we assessed all the data and information that was available. And the biggest opportunity for 211 in Saskatchewan was getting their web data sorted out. They had a phone call. They had a lot of phone call data, and they have a service and infrastructure set up around phone calls. But about 95% of their user interaction was through the web, and that seemed to be the biggest opportunity for us. So what you're seeing on the page right now is on the left-hand side was the old 211 site. There's a new one up right now, but this was the old one that was up last year. And essentially what you would do is on the left-hand side where you see all those colored squares, you'd pick an area that you were looking for or that was of interest to you, or below that, there's a search box. So if you were looking for something specific that you couldn't find in the boxes before, you could just type in a search and find the service or category of service you're looking for. The page in the middle is what's called a search results page. So when you put a search in, a list of all the products and services came up, or not products, all the services came up. And the third image on the right is actually the information of the particular business. And so if you were looking for a, some type of service, you could see on the search results page in the middle all the information, the address, the phone number. In some cases, you could see the email address of the service you were looking for. Now that sounds good in terms of you're getting information to the user right away. But the problem with this is that you don't understand what information that the user actually found useful. You don't understand if it was the address that they were looking for, if it was the phone number. If it was the phone number, did they actually call the people? And in some cases where email addresses were on the user information on the under location, you couldn't find, you didn't know if people clicked to email the pieces. So this started to paint a picture of we have some information. We know people searched 211 for X amount of information, but we didn't know what they did with that information moving forward. So here's what we did. So again, on the left-hand side, you see the search results page, and then we just blew up here the information that was on the location. So what we did is we took out that location and contact information. So what you saw then when you did a search in the search results page was essentially you had to click into the listing. Now, if you're in any kind of user experience world like I've been since 1995 when I built my first website, you know that you want to reduce the amount of clicks that it takes for somebody to get somewhere. That's kind of the ultimate user experience. That's true in some cases, but you also sacrifice a lot of information and data in other cases, and you sacrifice the ability to get the user better information if you don't understand what they're looking for. So we decided to make a user work just a little bit harder to get the information that they were looking for, so we understood how to in the future better serve them that information. So what that looks like is this. People would click into a listing, and we would do things like first of all, we made everything clickable. And in some cases where you had a phone number and you're on a desktop computer and you're not going to call from your computer, or most people aren't, even though you can, we wanted to be able to track if people were looking for the phone number. So all we did was put in these simple click to reveals. And as soon as somebody clicked on that business line phone number, then we knew that they were looking for a phone number, and that was an important piece of information. We also set up tracking on the contact us and on the website and a few other pieces of the site. So this helped us understand the user flow a little bit better, how people use the site a little bit better. And this allows 211 to make information or make decisions based on information as opposed to what we all think looks well, or what we all think the user does. That is critical mistake that we all make, which is we think we know the user, and often we think what we really know is our own behaviors, not the user behaviors. So part of this was setting up infrastructure to make sure that we could test assumptions and test our ideas and back it with data and either prove or disprove, what we thought was happening. It's kind of one of the most valuable tools about our co-leads and our groups, and a lot of the work that Scott has done, which is we try to remain as agnostic to the results and to the technology and to everything as possible, and just help leverage the data to help us inform our thinking. So this is a shot of Google Analytics, and so tracking all those pieces, like tracking somebody who clicks on a phone number, or somebody who clicks on a website, or somebody who clicks on a listing, or somebody who clicks on search, those are what are called events. And so you can see, as soon as we implemented this tracking, we started tracking events like very fast. And these are all data points that we could all of a sudden analyze really quickly. So this is just the month of June. And when we implemented a more sophisticated data capture system on the website, within pretty much a couple of weeks, we got 16,000 events, which are pieces of data that we could analyze about the user behavior. So because of that, we saw service page increase, specific service page views increased by 77%. Now you may think, well, no kidding, you saw a service page increase. So that's the page of the service that somebody's looking for. You force them to go to that page. That's why you'd get that service page increase. But by getting people to go to those service pages, we're actually helping them evaluate whether pages are actually and services are useful for them or not. And things like daycares have waiting lists, and some do and some don't. And there are certain services that are meant for certain people and certain categories of people. So this really helped us increase the quality of the pages to our people. Our average time on service pages increased by 26%. And so again, this is helping 211 get the right information to the right people. And then what's called a bounce rate, our service page bounce rate decreased. And so what a bounce is when somebody comes to a page on a site and then leaves without doing anything. Essentially, they bounce off a page without doing anything. And so it's really important for your user to not bounce, because that means that you're actually meeting their needs. And so a decrease in bounce rate is really important, and a 15% essentially decrease in bounce rate is pretty significant. So the outcomes of our work with 211 was that they had a more thorough understanding of the value and availability of the web data. Now, in addition to that, our data team, Marina and Scott, worked on building actually a centralized kind of like a data warehouse for them, and where all the phone call data and the web data could be brought together and be used together. So that was a really important piece for them. The data isolation in organizations, and especially in charities and nonprofits, is really problematic. You have donor data in one hand, and then the client services team is looking at the essentially the customers that the nonprofit is serving, and then there's all these different pieces of data that don't talk to each other. So coherence is really important, and data talking to each other is really important. The second piece is we're able to measure outcomes more specifically, and the outcomes of what we call referrals to other services within Saskatchewan. So 211 is the middle person, so to speak, and so they don't provide any of the services, but they really are focused on connecting the user and the service together. And because we were able to help 211 with that, and then we were able to help them on the fly kind of adapt the website before they built their new website to the conditions of the users. And so today there's a new website, which is an additional investment by 211 into their web infrastructure. And this happened, 211 was able to use the data that we collected to help inform a better user experience for their users. And so the timing of our work was great. And then we are continuing to contribute to 211. 211 has generalized site for the generalized population, and now also though they have other specific portals and resources for victims of abuse and other child care specific portals, and more are coming down the pipe. So by building out a data infrastructure ahead of time, which if you're not familiar with data, this may seem complex, or if you're familiar with data, not familiar with web data specifically. You know, these things can seem complex, but there really is, not to minimize the complexity of the work, there really is some simple things that a lot of organizations can do just to help get better information through the system, to help them make better decisions. And the last thing I'll say about 211 is that and our work with 211 or the Food Bank or Sophia House or Pro Bono Law Saskatchewan or any of the organizations and charities we've worked with in Saskatchewan is that, you know, our goal is to help enable organizations to do what their mission is. And so, you know, we really work well with organizations that know where they're going and what they're trying to do and just have some questions. And our goal is really to be the people that help organizations get better access to information so they can make better decisions with better information, even if they're making great decisions already, because many charities and nonprofits are already doing really well. So, you know, we're just, we try to help enable in the most positive of senses.
Okay, I'm just going to wrap this up real quick here so we've got some time for questions. Really, this is really around kind of what our asks are. And so we're always looking for, you know, what's the next organization we should be working with? Who really could use some help out there? So if folks on the call have any ideas in terms of whether it's your favorite charities or nonprofits, or if you know specifically of one that is struggling in some way, shape, or form. And again, we've done things just from reporting to help out with web, and there's a number of different services we offer. But if you can think of anything that, or any organization that could really benefit from our help, if you want to let us know. And on the next slide, we have kind of our contact information, or it can go in the chat, either or. And then the second piece is we're always looking for data volunteers for projects and initiatives. The biggest need that we do have is around kind of senior data folks that want to or can mentor or provide leadership on projects. The way we structure a lot of our projects is we have mentors and kind of folks that are just learning. And so we try to get individuals the opportunity to learn from other folks. I noticed there's one question in the chat just around kind of what tools and what do we use. We pretty much are open to anything that can be used that folks want to use. We will provide some guidance, but Regina Food Bank, as an example, folks used whatever they were comfortable with, and some of the more senior folks just kind of guided the analysis that was going on. And then we obviously work with the nonprofit or charity to figure out what fits in their environment. But from the analysis phase, we pretty much will offer anything. But again, back to the volunteer side of things, if there's anyone that does want to volunteer, we do have a form on our website just to fill out. We capture a little bit of your information, and then we can kind of blast out the opportunities as they come through for projects that we work on. So with that, we will open it up to questions here if folks have any.
I just want to just to tap on or tag on to Scott's comments about volunteers. One of the comments that we receive from senior folks that volunteer with us is, and I'll actually kind of quote a guy who you know, worked on a first product with us, and he said, "Look, he's like, Kevin, the reason I like Data for Good is because I'm a $250 an hour data engineer." And he said, I can go do other volunteer work, which is really useful and needed and meaningful, but I would really rather just use my skills as a data engineer to do data work for charities and nonprofits. And so our particular, the senior folks who come on board with us really enjoy the mentorship of helping others come along, but also working on projects that have a meaningful impact and providing their senior expertise and guidance to Data for Good to be a part of these larger or smaller projects. And so it's, you know, we really try to make sure that we're not just doing work, but we're really satisfying the needs of our volunteers as well, whether that is fulfillment through projects or leadership or mentorship or things like that.
Great. Thanks so much, Scott and Kevin. We do have some time for questions, and there have been a few that are rolling in here. So thanks everyone for sharing your questions. I'm going to try to get to them in the order that they've arrived, or at least that I've seen them. And just one related to that first question about tools. There was a second part to that that I'm wondering if you can comment on. And the question was, are there some that are more user-friendly that could be readily used by data visualization newbies?
So the one that I always recommend, and the one that's kind of our standard, is Microsoft's Power BI. The reason for that is a lot of organizations that we work with are already a Microsoft shop, and it's very easy for them to integrate. The Power BI desktop is free to use, and it really is just one step above Excel. So a lot of folks that are familiar with it or comfortable with it can really kind of jump right into that. And so that is the tool that we get most folks to use if they don't already know one, whether it's Tableau or SAS or otherwise. So it would be Power BI would be kind of the one I would suggest.
Great, thanks so much. So the next question that came in, and I think this is in reference to the work on 211, and so the person who asked, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but they're curious if you did any user satisfaction or feedback to validate that the users were more satisfied with the changes that were made.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And um, it's a good question because, you know, data you can read data any way you want and make the assumption that it means whatever you want it to mean. So for example, if you have a website and you see that users are clicking on 5 pages, you can go, wow, our website is so engaging. People, they just can't stop clicking through the site and reading the content, and way to go, like way to go us. We're getting as so many page views per customer. The flip side to that is people are so angry on our site. They're just flipping through pages trying to find the thing they can't find, and they're so mad and angry. So you really don't know. Data doesn't provide the context for a lot of decisions, and so it's really important to get the humans into that decision making. So there are ways that we can, having said that, there are ways that we can use data to provide context, but we leave the user engagement piece. 211 does have surveys around the user engagement piece, and they did launch a new website. So we've had a lot of positive feedback on that, but Data for Good specifically hasn't surveyed the 211 audience yet, although we are seeing positive indicators such as time on site, more page views, more specific services being looked at. So I hope that answers the question, kind of.
Thanks. Yeah, and important insight that the numbers, we can only count on the numbers to tell us so much, and then we have to get the humans and their experiences involved. So there's another question here. Curious if there are folks already working on a Data for Good chapter for Saskatoon, because they're wanting to get involved if that's the case, or working with others to get it started.
Yeah, good question. So we have a meetup in Saskatoon already, and so you can search Data for Good Saskatoon. We don't have formal leadership in Saskatoon, so that is something that we're open to for sure. And if you're interested in that, we're happy to talk. And so our contact information is up here. What often is a good route into working in your own city is working with us on projects and starting there. And so finding a charity or a nonprofit, and we can collaborate on how to potentially work with a small charity or a larger charity or whatever size. Actually, it doesn't really matter to us. And that might be a good entry point. Running chapters, there's a lot to them. And so, yeah, everything is on the table, but there is a meetup. So if you want to Google Data for Good Saskatoon meetup, join the meetup there, and also feel free to reach out to us on one of these channels.
Great, thanks so much. Another somewhat related question here, and the comment is, this sounds too good to be true. I'm on the board of a nonprofit in Toronto that I think may be ready to improve its data capacity and use, and they ask, are your services really free?
Yep. So everything we do is free in terms of the volunteering and individuals that we bring to the table. The only thing that there may be cost involved, and again, that's completely up to the organization, is if they want to invest in infrastructure. whether that's, you know, tooling or otherwise. And in some cases, some organizations, Regina Food Bank is being one of them, has said, you know what, it would be really helpful if we actually had a data person on staff. And so after going through the work, they're deciding to make those changes. None of this, though, are we requiring. There are, you know, low cost, no cost options in order to do this work. And so there really doesn't need to be any cost outlay. And yeah, in terms of Toronto, there is a group there in terms of Data for Good. And so you can reach out to them, and I'm sure they would love to give you a hand.
Yeah, one of that's a great point, Scott, around the food bank. There is that's actually not an uncommon outcome of the work. A project I was involved in Calgary for the distress center turned into enough work, free work, volunteer work, I should say, was done that the person in charge of programs at the distress center was able to pitch to the board for funding for a full-time data person, and got approval for it. And so they 5 years ago started with their first data person as a hire. So it does sound too good to be true, but it really is really good, and it really is really true. Can something be truer than true? Really true? But anyway, it's true.
Thanks so much. So there's a few questions here about how to volunteer. And so I'm assuming folks, if they'd like to volunteer, can reach out at the contact information that's been shown on the screen. And then someone has asked, do you know, or could you tell us when the next data visualization challenge is?
Yeah,
When
we're
it's
looking
coming
to
up?
launch the next one in January. We are working with a couple of different local organizations to get the data set together. That's actually the biggest challenge, is finding a data set that will work. Ones that we want to, again, keep it local. There's tons of data sets that you can find online, but we want to have something that would be of impact locally, because that's kind of our mission and what we want to do. And so the intent would, you know, keep your eyes peeled. January is when we should be launching the next one.
Excellent. Coming up soon. So I'm really pleased to see all these questions rolling in. I think we might have time for one more that I see here in the Q&A box. So they're commenting, excellent presentation and applaud your work. It's very honorable. So the question is, I think you mentioned creating a data warehouse for 211. Did you run into resourcing or financial issues with that? And how did you help support that?
Yeah, and so data warehousing, I would say, you know, light. What we had done was we had worked kind of on the back end with the infrastructure that they actually had. And so we were storing it in their local environment and not in a data warehouse per se, not a database, not like SQL Server or Oracle, and really just connecting it through Power BI. And so doing the modeling in there. These organizations, their data sets aren't extremely large. And so there really isn't the same constraint kind of on the data side. So from a data warehousing perspective, it was really done through the modeling in Power BI. Again, free in terms of what was going on, other than just making sure that folks, they had the storage space, whether it was, you know, OneDrive or SharePoint or even just a local folder. And so that's really the only outlay that 211 had on that project, other than, again, they did start up a new website, but that's kind of a little bit different.
Yeah, and they had 211 had at the beginning of our project, they had a server that looked like it was going to be able to power a bunch of things, that the work that we could do. They're in the process. It turned out that it kind of wasn't as usable for this particular purpose as possible. But the work that we had done had led them down the path of actually helping them understand what their server environment was and what it's actually used for, and what it couldn't be used for. So
And one of the
go ahead.
Sorry, one of the big challenges with that is if we were to stand up infrastructure for them, SQL Server or otherwise, it's the ongoing maintenance and support. And so unless they're going to, you know, hire or look for other resources, that would be kind of ongoing support. And at this point in time, that isn't what Data for Good does. Like Kevin said, we do provide kind of warranty work. We try and kind of teach them how to fish, but the intent isn't to kind of manage infrastructure and tools and processes.
Great. Thank you. I've seen one more. I think it's pretty short, so I'm going to put it out there. Are there resources you would recommend for those starting to learn Power BI?
Yeah, actually, Microsoft's website has a couple of really good certifications that are free. So you can kind of go through, do the learning, do the training. They've got a whole bunch of information there. So I would probably say go through that first. That's probably a really good start for most individuals that are just jumping into it.
Great. Thanks so much. Well, I think that's all the questions in the chat, and we're very close to the end of our time. So I want to share my gratitude with you, Kevin and Scott, both for the work that you do at Data for Good and for taking time out of your day to join us today to tell us about it. And I think you've ignited a lot of excitement among our attendees today, and perhaps even found some new volunteers and leaders to contribute to the work as well. So as a token of our gratitude, you will be receiving a pair of these beautiful I Heart QI socks. So watch your mail. They'll be
Oh,
coming soon. You'll be part of the club that gets to wear these beautiful socks.
yeah,
Um,
Can't wait.
and yeah, so watch your mail.
for sure.
Um, and I'd like to throw out to anyone listening, if you'd like to get your hands on a pair of these socks, we invite you to become a QI Power Hour speaker as well. So a link will be shared in the chat. If you have an idea for a QI Power Hour session, we'd be happy to hear it. Please click on that link and share your idea with us, and you too could be the proud owner of a pair of these socks. So just the last couple of things before we wrap up. In the spirit of continuous improvement, we will be sending out a survey following QI Power Hour. And I just want to flag for you, you might see a message that we're taking you to an external site. Not to worry, that's taking you to the SurveyMonkey survey. It's safe, you can click on that link. And please do fill out the survey. We look at all the feedback and use that to continuously improve our sessions. And we thank you for your time in providing that. And so this brings us to the end of our session today. So thank you so much for sharing your time with us today. And thank you again to Kevin and Scott for joining us and telling us about the great work that Data for Good does. QI Power Hour itself will be taking a break for the month of December. However, we are really excited to share with you our top hits of 2021. So please keep your eye out for an upcoming blog post with our top QI Power Hour sessions from 2021. And of course, as before, we invite you to join our distribution list to stay connected and to learn about the all new upcoming sessions starting in 2022. So I want to thank you all for joining us today, and please take care, stay well, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Take care, everyone.